Welcome to JustWannaQuilt, a research podcast coming out of Tulane University Law School, where we explore all kinds of things, stories about quilting, tools, field trips, maybe some famous quilters stop by, and, of course, a little bit of copyright thrown in just for fun. This is Elizabeth Townsend Guard. I'm a law professor at Tulane University Law School, and I just wanna quilt. So today we talked to Ann Wasserman. She is she's part of the quilting army, and she is also someone who restores quilts. That's part of what she does as a profession. And she also makes art quilts, which are super cool. She also now volunteers, thanks to listening to the show, for the Social Justice Sewing Academy. So we talked to her about a bunch of stuff, and she promised to come back and talk to us about buttons.
I'm Ann Wasserman, and I'm in Evanston, Illinois.
I know Evanston. I went to Northwestern as a cherub one summer, so I was at high school.
Yeah, my husband and I both graduated from there and met there and never left.
Oh, and never left. That's very sweet. It's a really beautiful campus. Okay, so your first memory of someone sewing or quilting in your life?
It would be sewing. My mom sewed. She sewed some clothes. A lot of blouses for her and little dresses for me, and she always was making new little curtains for the kitchen window because they faded out, you know. And and she taught me to sew when I was like, I don't know, 11 maybe, something like that. So
and how did you get into quilting? What about quilting? What drew you to quilting?
That was her too, because everything we sewed, she saved scraps.
Yeah.
And in a box in the cabinet and said, someday we'll make a quilt. And we never did. And and then at Northwestern, I started at Northwestern.
Really?
I was working for a professor before and after graduation, and doing a lot of computer stuff. And that was in mainframe computer days where there was hours of waiting for turnaround. And I took a little quilting class and at the, non-credit just for fun class program that they had. And it stuck and I never stopped.
So were you doing hand quilting then while you were waiting for stuff?
Yeah.
Oh, that's really cool.
Which intrigued all the guys at the computing center, which was one of the ways I met my husband, who's a programmer. Yeah. So it's pretty entwined,
That's really important. Quilting is very important in your life. That's really interesting.
Right.
So tell me, move up to now. So you do a whole bunch of different things now. Tell me sort of how that progressed to, because I think it's really interesting, the breadth of things that you do. And tell me more a little bit as sort of how you got here.
I started, doing a lot of traditional patterns and quilts and stuff, and got into art quilts, I'm going to say somewhere in the 80s, just because it seemed more exciting to me to not know how it was going to turn out.
Yeah.
And not do the same block 20 times in order to make a quilt, that kind of thing. And I think that's kind of when, Michael James and Nancy Halpern and all that were just starting that whole thing. So I kind of jumped on that as it was starting. And the quilt repair happened because there was a little antique quilt gallery in Evanston, and I started working there. Several of us did. Two women owned it. One was a sculptor, one was a painter, and they didn't quilt. So they hired quilters to actually sit there and show and sell the quilts. They were interested in the graphic. That's when the whole idea of putting quilts on the wall and appreciating the graphics of them was starting as well. And people brought in quilts that needed repair. After a while, people, heard about the place, and we all started learning how to do quilt repair.
So interesting.
I took some classes and, stuff like that. And it stuck. And I do both ends.
You do both ends, which is kind of remarkable. I mean, and the practical, the costume stuff. So, I mean, I think it's just so interesting that your world now, what role does anthropology play in sort of how you approach quilting?
Well, I've always liked old things, so that has made me real comfortable with the antique quilts, and I've just always been interested in why people quilt. That's why I'm intrigued with all the stuff that you're doing with your podcasts and the kind of questions you ask, because I love that concept of trying to figure out how quilting works in people's lives and what happens, and how quilting works in society too, and across different cultural groups, and, all that sort of thing is real intriguing.
Yeah. It's interesting, isn't it? And it's kind of amazing the quilting connects us all, but there's so many different voices and opinions and spaces of it. It's far more than I ever dreamed. I mean, it's kind of remarkable.
Yes. I know.
Right? It's really, it's been really interesting.
And it's taken me all sorts of places that I never expected.
Too, right? I mean, that's part of why I started. So, there were 2 interviews. The first 2 interviews I did was with actually in Chicago. Chicago's a really interesting space, right? Good. So I interviewed Weeks Ringel and Bill Kerr. That was one of the first fancy interviews. And then I interviewed a regular person, Julia Driscoll, who's a librarian, a teen librarian at a public. And their interview was great, right? Because it was fancy and all that. And you expected it to be interesting, but hers was like incredible, right? Like she would be talking about her colors and how she did all this stuff, and it was like, oh my gosh, like these have to. It can't just be me listening to these, because like it was like so moving. Like, and she was just like, she made this ridiculously fancy quilt that took forever, and that was the beginning of it. It was the regular people that were like, it was kind of, I mean, historian by training, but also you kind of started wanting to dig of like, well, how are these 2 groups the same? How are this very professional couple and this librarian, how do they operate in the same sphere? Which was really, that's the beginning of it. So I don't know. Okay. Anthropology. Yeah. So I think I need more training in anthropology, because it seems.
Anthropology is gorgeous.
Yeah. It's got, because you see you see more probably than I do. So you have the 3 basic rules of quilt care. Number 1.
In research.
Do as little as possible. Tell me about that. So we're going to go through these. So do as little as possible. What is that? Why?
I know. Just because it's an old piece and it's got a lot of history in it.
Right. Be respectful of the history. Don't be all crazy about like having to do everything to make it better.
Right.
Okay. Don't do anything that can't be undone.
That I learned. I went to a symposium that the Texas Quilt Guilds put together, mostly for, like, each guild in Texas sent a couple people, but they opened it up to other non-Texans too. I was one of
pretended you put like a cowboy hat on. You're like,
no, people could tell by the way I talk.
Totally disguised as Texan. All right.
I was one of the few Yankees there.
Really?
They really did.
Yeah. When we moved to New Orleans, it was the first time I felt like I was a Yankee. I was a Yankee. It was weird.
Yeah, I know. I said, oh wow, this really, from the anthropology standpoint, here I am, right in the middle of it, But and that was one of the things they stressed there was, if anybody ever wants to go back and see what the original fabric was, it should be there. The patches should be removable.
So when you repair it, you don't remove what's already there?
No. And I think, I don't remember where I got this bit, but it's really true. If you pull out the old fabric, even if there's shreds of it left, it's somehow helping support the structure of the quilt. And things are much more likely to skew if you start taking out the old fabrics. And if you start opening seams, then you've got loose thread ends to deal with. It's just like creates mounting problems.
So we bought, I bought one old quilt with somebody that said you should buy an old quilt. So I did, and it's so awesome. And it's really, it's pretty messed up. It's got like bits that were worn. And I like that part of it. So tell me why people want to repair quilts? Because I also hear like, well, one day I want to repair my grandmother's quilt and all that. Like,
Right.
what is it about the wear that people want to fix, I guess?
Well, some people don't. I mean, there's restoration, which is putting on new fabric and making things look whole again. And there's conservation, which is taking care of the shreds, basically.
Yeah.
And I talk to people about both, and people choose in different directions. Some people do want to, put it back on the bed and have it looking good.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And then I talk to them about how that creates more wear down the road or fading or whatever, and I give them all sorts of care advice and stuff. I mean, it's an aesthetic decision, I think, and some people feel good taking care of their grandma's quilt that way.
Oh, yeah. And are there specific resources? Like, how are you matching? Like, you've got one example of worn silk with cotton underlay and sheer fabric covering, and it's kind of messed up. It's brown, it's messed up, and then it's really pretty on the next side. It seems like magic. How are you doing that? Like, what kind of tools are necessary to do this? Because it seems like it would be impossible to match things and
it's definitely impossible. In a word, I mean, I think museums do, and conservation labs do more dyeing, which I don't know how to do.
Yeah.
And I don't, therefore. But you should see my sewing room. It's at this point, it's so full, I can't really work in there anymore.
Because you've got resources to be able to repair things.
It's fabric.
Find it. Yeah.
Right. So people know I do this now. If they come across a batch of fabric, they give it to me.
Yeah.
Which is lovely. I've gone around to estate sales for years, picking up old dresses and tablecloths or whatever. I don't know, but picking up old fabrics. And
are you trying to match the fabric? So another one that's like before it's missing, like it's a star and it's missing a couple of the points have like kind of fallen apart, and you added the points back in. Right. Are you trying to necessarily match the time period or like both the colors? Like, how are you choosing what fabric you put in when you're replacing it?
Well, preface that by saying some people are real adamant about only using vintage or antique fabrics to repair. I'm not adamant about that. I go for what looks best usually. Most of the people who want me to work for them don't want to spend thousands of extra, it's not thousands, but extra dollars. I mean, the time to search for and find an antique fabric that looks good is huge.
Yeah.
Though I do have some on hand, So I go for what looks best, and that combines everything, and the print style, the print spacing I've discovered, the colors, it's just whatever I have that's the best match.
Yeah. And then are these usually done, they have to be done by hand. Are you sewing them by hand?
Yeah. Right. Sometimes on a newer quilt that's machine quilted, I'll redo the quilting on my machine.
So that it matches what's already there.
But otherwise, no, it's all by hand.
That's amazing. That's amazing.
It has to be.
Do you feel like you're in, like, what I think is so cool about any quilt actually is that, like, when you pick it up and you look at it, you're in the mindset or in the kind of the world of that person that made it.
Totally.
Do you feel like you're like going in, like, I don't know. Do you feel like you have a relationship with that quilter that quilted it? Yeah.
Yeah, and the people who bring it to me. I mean, a lot. It's interesting in terms of where the quilt world's gone. When I first started doing this, there were more collectors bringing me quilts they had found, and now it's almost all family members with grandmas and great grandmas and mothers quilts. And it's kind of, I used to have both, I guess, and now it's much more family quilts.
Interesting.
So I get in touch with the family history too. So
that's really cool.
When people share history, And I ask them if I can blog about it. And so I've got like this ongoing record of stuff. And sometimes they contribute family photos, so I can put those on the blog.
I love it. Right.
And I get to see the face of the woman who made the quilt that I just prepared,
That's really amazing. It's really amazing.
I know.
How many of the quilts that you do have labels on them? How much are our quilts getting? Like, we always have this thing of label, label, label.
Mm-hmm.
Do you find a lot of them have labels, or not so much?
Not so much.
Not so much.
At most, it's a date. And I love a dated quilt, obviously.
Yeah.
But, actual labels, no. I mean, there's some occasionally with someone has signed a dedication, maybe. I like one that was I'm thinking of that was a Christmas present, and the mother embroidered on the back, to Richard, with the Merry Christmas with the date or something like that,
Yeah.
But no, tons that aren't labeled. So when people bring in family quilts, I'm always telling them, write this all down,
Right.
Take a photo of the quilt, keep it with, put it on the page with what you've written so that, people know what quilt it's referring to.
Yeah. So interesting.
Trying to help with that process a little bit,
Okay. And then the third thing is, we have the list. Preventative maintenance is the best medicine.
Of course.
What are you?
Keep it out of the light. Don't put it in the washing machine. Don't take it to the dry cleaner. All that kind of stuff.
Right.
Because the things that notoriously damage quilts, you don't want to do, because then you don't have to call me and say, can you do this? And I'll say, well, it's going to cost you a bundle now,
Now, what do you use to wash them? Because there's all these like different companies out there that have like, oh, you should use this kind of stuff. What do you think is, like, when you get a quilt like this and it seems musty or it just does need washing, what do you do?
What I've learned and read on conservation places is a soap called Orvis, O-R-V,
yeah,
O-R-V,
right.
V-U-S, and that's what I've been using because it's supposedly the most gentle, the purest. You don't want whiteners, you don't want perfumes, you don't want fabric softeners, all that stuff.
Right.
It's hard on the fabrics, and I've had good luck with it. So,
interesting.
Knock on wood, I've never had a disaster, but you maybe heard the quote, Xenia Cord, who, know her name, and I think you interviewed her.
Yeah, we did, right.
I haven't listened to it yet.
Yeah.
But she's pretty notoriously famous for this quote about, I'm not going to say it in her words, but it's something like, so you're thinking about washing an antique quilt. Here's what you do. Lie down on the couch and wait until the feeling passes.
It's really good. I like that phrase.
It's golden, yeah.
It is golden.
On a, so I only really wash quilts for people if
it's really, really necessary.
Or if it's something that you just can't do anything else with until you get it cleaned because of where it's been. And conservation labs have huge amounts of water treatment and washing tables and all sorts of equipment that I just don't have.
It's really interesting.
Yeah.
Cool. I want to show you the quilt I got. But when you are at these antique things, there's like usually a couple of spaces that have antique quilts. I don't know what you do with all that. When you see them, what are you looking for? If you are at a show and there's an antique, do you stop and look, or do you? Yeah, I mean, I don't know. Maybe you don't. You may be like, I've seen it all. I don't care anymore. But like, how should we understand sort of that space in the quilting industry? Like the antique, the dealers that are there, and sort of what role do antique quilts play in our world at this point?
Gosh,
I know. It used to be that a lot of people were buying them up for companies were buying up to create reproduction fabric, right? That was like a thing.
Well, and to make things, and people buy them up to make used to. I hope it's kind of stopped buying them up to make teddy bears. And
really,
oh yeah, when I started out, that was a cool thing. People were, you're crinkling up your face. I get it.
That's weird. That's really interesting.
Yeah, and awful. And And
Awful.
then
Why the repurposing is awful? I'm interested if, do you feel like there's rules? Because we have a couple, so we bought some triangles that were kind of weird and made them into houses, and we did other things. There's another, we went to a place that they had dyed a old antique quilt into black, like just it's all black, but you can see it underneath. Like there's a sense of like, what are you supposed to, is there kind of, do you feel like, is that a bad thing to be doing? Like repurposing into teddy bears and dyeing it black and, like,
I think for me it is
like a respect for it that is like, don't mess with it.
Well, certainly not if you're not sure what exactly you have, because you could ruin something really amazing.
Right.
But if you make it into teddy bears or clothes or things like that, those things are going to get washed and tossed around and used, and it's not going to last hardly at all. And I don't know if people realize that. So I think that needs,
yeah, I get that.
If people actually know what they're doing on those kind of levels, I can't tell them not to. It's their thing. Yeah. I have occasionally cut quilts for people just to save part of it.
Yeah.
When it, but most of the time I advocate for not cutting, because if you want to save what your ancestor did,
you're preserving history. And as historians and anthropologists, we feel like history matters, and that's kind of mucking with it.
Right.
Now, what about go ahead, sorry.
Well, there's a lot of quilts out there that maybe could get away without that kind of preservation. But then if it's otherwise in good shape, there's going to be fewer. The more that get cut up, eventually maybe 1930s flower gardens, which seem like a dime a dozen, are going to be super rare,
Yeah. Interesting. Huh. Interesting. All right. So quilt history, how important is it to us today? You lecture at Quilt History at the Art Institute of Chicago, Textiles Art Center, Field Museum in Chicago, and Quilt Guilds. And so that's
time ago. I hasten to say that was a while ago. Yeah.
A while ago. But still, what role should history be playing? Because some people feel like we are a super consumerist society that's kind of ahistorical. And that we've lost our history in some way. Do you feel that way? Or do you think that we still have, like, what role does history play in our current environment?
It's certainly disappeared since when I started. I have people coming in all the time with family quilts saying, I have these things my grandmother made, but none of my kids want them. What do I do with them? And I think that's really a shame.
That is a shame. Why is that so weird?
Yeah, because people want, it's just this old thing, and people they don't want to put it on their bed because it's old, but it's your grandma, it's your great grandmother's at that point, I don't understand that. Yeah. I think it's a shame at any rate. And there's not a whole lot to be done. I think the market for buying antique quilts has kind of disappeared from what I gather and what I see.
Yeah.
There are people who do still, but it's much less common. I think, I think it just generically history is important, and what these women did, and that they were artists then.
Yeah.
Were just as groundbreaking then as people feel they're being groundbreaking now. I think, I don't know. I don't think there's anything more specific than it's history, folks.
It's history, right.
Yeah.
And some people had complained about the Modern Quilt Guild when they first started, that they thought they were inventing stuff when in fact it had happened before, that because of the kind of historical amnesia, that people were thinking it was their own thing. And also that you talk to Pam Weeks and others that are like, this has been going on forever. Like, don't think that just because we have art quilts now doesn't mean there wasn't art quilts before. That like somehow we lose perspective when there's lots of people that have been doing lots of creative things for a long time. That they're not always just patchwork, so.
Totally. And they're amazing. They're just as amazing.
Yeah.
And the modern quilt thing. That's what I wrote in my initial thing. The modern quilt thing is just real questioning. I just have so many, I don't quite get, to me it seems like a real disconnect.
Yeah.
It's people doing abstract art on quilts. Okay, that's cool.
Yeah.
But it's not that new.
Right.
I don't think.
Yeah,
But
no, because yeah, it's interesting. Okay, we're gonna flip over to the other side. It's a perfect transition to
yeah,
art quilts. So you preserve antique quilts, which is awesome. You also make art quilts that are run the get all kinds of different art quilts.
yeah.
So tell me about that side of because you would think that you would be like, oh well, I just do kind of like you would be making what you were preserving, but you're not. You're making all kinds of things. So tell me that
Yeah.
side of your life of art quilts.
Well, that's really, like I said back at the beginning, that's really where I went after learning traditional quilting, because I thought it was more fun and surprising and interesting and stuff like that. And getting into the repair stuff was at base the best way to make money. Not that I wasn't interested in it and all that, but
But
doing
it
art.
is a way, right? So it's a way to, that's a very, like, that's super smart, right? That this is a way to be part of the quilt industry, do part of it, and that there's income,
Right,
which is
which we needed
clever.
at the time in our family when really started, made my website and did all that sort of stuff. We were at a point where I needed to start making some money.
Uh-huh.
And art is just really difficult as a way to make money. So, I mean, the art is something I've always enjoyed, and where, I am in my own quilting. So that's why there's this,
Yeah.
dichotomy. I mean, and the cool thing, I think, is to be making money at something that's so closely related to what I want to do in art.
Yeah.
I'm still working with fabric and stitching, so
Right.
it's kind of fun. But yeah, so I just that way the art can just be playing around then too. I don't have to worry
Do you
about.
feel like what you learned, it seems like you would learn techniques you'd be learning from the repair, that you would see how different people did things and no,
I don't think so.
no,
I don't think so. I mean, the
they're
old
all the same.
quilts are kind of, the techniques is pretty basic in that
Yeah.
sense. It's patchwork and hand quilting, and
Yeah.
but um, so no, I don't know that it's
No,
influenced.
you don't think it is.
I'd have to
Interesting.
really think about that. I mean,
Interesting.
they're just gorgeous, and I
Yeah,
don't
they
think
are.
I've ever said, "Oh, I love this color combination. I'll make a quilt in this color combination," or something like that. I don't.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, so your quilts are all kinds of different all kinds of different things, and they go back and they're amazing. Tell me about the something from nothing that you're doing.
Um, it's my own little challenge project. An interior decorator who lives near me found my website and asked me if I'd want all her sample books. She was clearing out her studio. So I said, sure, free fabric. And
Right.
yeah,
Because then right, you can't, I mean, what do you say? No.
right, great. And she basically filled my car, which was a little more than I'd anticipated. So I gave bunches of it to a grade school where a friend of mine works, gave it to the art room there, and kept a bin of it. And I just started in the midst of the repair work, because I really needed to do my own stuff too. I came up with this idea, like I said, just to make little fun things without any
Yeah.
heavy weight to them, using my rules are to use all the colorways of a particular print in the same quilt, and to make whatever the design of the quilt is somehow have something to do with the print of the quilt.
Oh, that's really cool.
No, the print of the fabric.
Yeah.
And I don't buy anything. I started out sometimes buying backing, but now I don't. I don't buy anything for them.
Very interesting.
The person, I also repair vintage clothes for a friend who has an Etsy shop, and she picks up all sorts of stuff for me. And usually she's keeping me in quilt backs for these projects, which is good.
That's really important because quilt back, they can be, you can need a lot of fabric for the back.
Right. Well, some of these are really tiny, but still. And I even use scraps of batting and stitch them together before I, bake them into the quilt and stuff like that. So that's what it is, and it's just grown and
They're
grown.
really pretty. I like them a lot.
The title is, when my kids were little, there was a folk singer we went to, and she had a song called Something from Nothing, which was a song rendition of a Jewish folk tale. of this little boy, and his grandfather knew how to sew, and he took, I think it started with a quilt. And as it got worn out, he kept using smaller and smaller pieces of this fabric to make smaller and smaller items till it got down to just a button. And the song was called Something from Nothing. And then the button got lost, I guess. And the grandson was heartbroken. And the grandfather said, well, we still have something. We have this story.
That's great.
Yeah.
I love it.
So, so that's what it is. And it's grown, and I don't know what I'm going to do with it now, but I'm feeling like I'm getting to the end of it.
Really,
definitely.
it's really pretty.
And
you use embellishments. Speaking of buttons, you have a number of both on the art quilts and here where you use buttons. Tell me about buttons and tell me just about buttons.
I love buttons. Your question about do I go to antique places and look at the quilts? I look at the quilts. I buy buttons. I cannot walk past button jars.
Interesting.
I have way, 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 way too many buttons, and I love them.
You love them. Why do you love the buttons?
Well, the variety is amazing.
Yeah.
I love the sound they make. It's a total tactile, all senses kind of thing. There's even smells to some of them, depending on what they were made of. I haven't really determined what that is yet, but there's that, what's it stuff called that people, Bakelite. And some of those early plastics disintegrate with a particular smell, and I'm not really sure. It's kind of an alcohol-y smell.
Interesting.
That I get sometimes.
I have to ask you, do you smell books? Our family, we smell books.
Yeah.
Smeller too? Yeah.
Not as intensely as I smell buttons.
Yeah, as buttons. It's funny.
But the
British books, the British printing, something about it is very specific. And like everybody,
and the Japanese too, I think.
Really?
I think so.
Yeah, there's always, when we get books, everyone's in our family just smells them. It's just, gotta be.
Yeah.
I get the button smell thing.
I have old books that were my mom's when she was a child. So I have, that old book smell too.
The old book smell is nice too, yeah.
Yeah.
I like that.
But buttons are my downfall.
That's funny. I like that.
Yeah.
All right. So tell me, hold on, I'm going back to my list. Crap, where'd it go? What did I do with it? Okay, here we go. Okay. So tell me about, so we've got the art quilts. Art quilts are done machine and hand quilted, or like mostly machine? They're all kinds of things.
At this point.
Applique, all kinds of stuff, right?
Yeah, right. But mostly machine because of getting it done.
Yeah. And then tell me about the costume side of your life.
Well, that's kind of fallen by the side of the road, but I thought I was going to try to, follow through with that more. But both my kids are stage people.
Well, that's all you have to say. Like, you just get sucked because you're
right.
Then you just
totally.
end up, right? Yeah.
Yep.
Totally.
So yeah, I mean, if you look at the pictures there, it's mostly kid shows.
Yeah, kids shows
that I worked on, and it never got beyond that. But I love what I learned about it. Costuming is fascinating. It's just fascinating, just how it works in with, visually showing the storyline or changes in a character's life path as they go through the play and stuff. It's really neat.
Really great. It's really great. Yep, that's how my mom learned to sew, because she had to make our costumes.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah, once it started with my daughter's student dance company, and once I kind of opened my mouth to someone about, well, I was probably sitting and sewing in the waiting room while she was dancing, actually. I don't think I had to open my mouth.
People just see you.
Like, oh, we need this dress. Could you do it? Well, I don't know. Because it's way different than making a quilt that's flat and doesn't have to fit anybody.
Totally. It's ridiculous. It has circly things and arms.
Yeah.
It's a whole different thing. Yes, I get that. Totally. It's a bit intimidating. Zippers, and people actually want it to work, like the zippers and things like that.
Yeah.
Like making it work with quilts. All right. So last topic, the book. Tell me about preserving our quilt legacy. Tell me about the book, and when did this start, and how did you like writing it, and sort of And it's available in all the major quilt spaces, like it's out in Paducah and other spaces. So tell me about the book.
I don't think Paducah has any right now.
Oh, you don't?
I am not good at marketing. So.
You're not?
No.
We got to get you more. Well, we'll help that. We'll help you with that.
They had some, and I have not written back to say, do you want more?
See?
Oops.
Oops. Okay.
So, I actually started writing it before my kids were born. I just felt like, I needed to write down what I was doing.
That's really cool.
And I didn't actually then work on it till my first one went off to college, and all of a sudden I had time and I was missing her, and I just started doing this because it was I did some of the mechanical parts of it. Like I did the drawings of the step-by-step stuff myself. Because by then it was really neat to wait that long, because when I first started it, the computer world wasn't at all where it is now. And by the time I actually started doing it, I could take all the photos myself and do all the artwork myself.
Amazing,
I didn't have to pay people to do that.
Right.
Because if I'd had to pay people to do that, I would
have been huge.
Be making anything.
Too much.
And a very good friend of mine does book design, and I did pay her for that. And she designed it and did the layout and stuff, and she did just a bang up job on it. So I don't know. I just really felt like it's kind of like a legacy thing, I guess, that all this stuff I figured out needed to get written down. Yeah. But it's my stuff, and it's not the be all end all. It's what I've worked out for me. And there's like I say, there's controversy over whether to just use vintage fabrics or not. There's all sorts of people have all their own little specialty techniques and tools and stuff like that. But this is mine. And
do you feel like an amateur, like anybody could try it and do it, or do you feel like you need to just go to a profession? Like, what's the purpose of the book? Is it to help someone like me repair something small?
Yeah, I mean, it helps to have some hand sewing skills, or some intro to hand sewing skills at least. So. But other than that, no. I mean, the sewing itself is not that difficult. It's, running stitches and, it's not. I mean, I have reproduced some embroidery on things where dogs have chewed through embroidered parts of quilts. Dogs are my friends. They send me lots of business.
That's funny.
Yeah, watch out, folks. Don't let dogs sit on your quilts. But anyway.
That's funny.
Yeah. It isn't exactly that funny, but but yeah, lots of dog holes. But the stitching's pretty easy. It's more like getting the concepts, I guess, and figuring out the fabric choices and all that sort of stuff.
That's very cool.
And mostly that's covered. And then my blog, I put some stuff about, when I work on quilts, specific quilts, if I do something different, I'll write a blog about that sometimes. With the quilt owner's permission, I will say that in there. I always ask for permission to photograph.
Because it's their family history? Is that why?
Well, yeah, it's their possession, whether or not it's family history. And if they want, if they have cool family stories and send photos, I always ask, well, do you want me to use people's names or not? Right. And sometimes they do, and sometimes they don't, Those people can get kind of squeamish about having their stuff out in the... Yeah,
they get shy about things, right? It's interesting.
Yeah.
Very
so in terms of, all your questions about, well, where do you draw lines on things? I always ask people before I publish anything.
Now, do you feel, okay, I have two questions. First of all, blogging, like it and don't like it? What role does blogging play in your life?
I actually like it.
You do?
When my kids were, all of the social media that I do, people have pushed me into, and I said, I'm not going to do that. And it ends up like being kind of okay. Like I said, what am I going to blog about? And I have lots of stuff to blog about. I figured
Yeah.
that out, and I blog a lot, but it's purely professional, almost purely. I mean, I don't really blog about personal family stuff at all because I don't want that out there
Yeah.
in the world, you
Yeah.
know. Um,
Yeah.
so yeah, but I actually like blogging. I like Instagram. I didn't think when I first got on it, I was thinking,
What do you like about it? We're just starting, and it makes me nervous.
yeah,
I'm not sure why.
that's true. I mean, I like it. The immediacy is nice. I like that it's a visual thing because I do
Yeah.
visual stuff.
See, and I think that's my nervousness because I see all the copyright ridiculousness behind each photograph, and so it makes me a little
Yeah,
timid. But
yeah,
I'm getting over that, and we're just going to take a lot of photos, so it'll be fine. But
right.
yeah, it's interesting that it is so visual. Um,
Yeah, but it doesn't have. At first, I thought, well, there's no depth here at all
yeah,
in the comments or discussions. But I've found some people who, talk more deeply about things.
so interesting. And you think that's an okay thing to do on Instagram is to have more, like it isn't just kind of, and also I ask people why would you use Instagram, and some say like, oh, it's to just like show what's happening. Others are like, it's all promotion. Some of it's like, oh, connecting to companies. Like, it's just like people use it in different ways. And I mean, the Facebook stuff makes sense to me. It's community. It's kind of just conversations that are happening. But I'm still not quite sure where we fit with the Instagram world. I keep trying different ways of posting,
Yeah.
but I don't know. It's interesting. So
Most of the times, I'm just posting a notice when I've made a new blog post.
yeah, that's another way to do it, right? So
Yeah,
send
it
signals.
reaches a different audience,
Yeah,
you
yeah,
know. So
interesting. Very interesting.
yeah, but
Huh. Yeah. Yeah, so blogging. Okay, so intellectual property. That was my last big question, which is what role do you think these quilts do you think the quilts that are being made by the family members are published quilts? They're probably unpublished, right? Like they haven't circulated. We have different rules if something's published versus unpublished. So I don't know. What do you think about the intellectual property side of these quilts? Does anybody care? Maybe they don't care. But
the people who own them now, do they
yeah.
care?
Hmm.
I sort of doubt it. I mean, most of the things that I get that are older are, like I just finished one that's an improved 9-patch block. It's not, and it's a scrap quilt. I mean, there's
Yeah, it
nothing.
doesn't matter. And you think like something like that, an improved 9-patch scrap quilt, is there any value to having a copyright on that? Like, are there so many things that are just no, right? There is there as kind of what I want to understand is where's the base? Like, where's the part where you see so much of so many different things? Like, where do we just go? Like, that's just, why would you lock that? Like, there's nothing original there.
Right.
Or is everything original? Do you know what I'm saying? Like,
well, I don't know. Yeah,
I guess the question is there, do you find that there's a lot of commonality? That just a lot of things are common. There's just a commonness to it, and then why would you care about reproducing it or whether it's protected or not?
Like I've done a lot of double wedding rings, and sometimes they have in that little 4-patch where the rings intersect. A lot of times that's 4 solid colors and it's the same over the whole quilt. Sometimes people just patch those with the prints too. Sometimes I've had ones where the first 1 or 2 strips in the rings are the same everywhere around, and that gives a different rhythm to it also. Is that copyrightable? I don't know. It's kind of playing with color placement.
Right. So if it's the copyright says that if it's an independent selection, arrangement, and coordination of something, that you do get the copyright on it. But most of the time, like, who cares? Like, they're not registering it. They're not going to sue people. Like, if you're not going to like actively, and then like, I don't know. I'm really struggling right now to understand where that boundary is of when it's protectable and not, because oftentimes the Copyright Office says that if it's common, like a common, everybody does it kind of thing, then it's not protectable. So now we need to know what's, when you say the double wedding ring, well, some people do it this way and some people do it that way. Well, if it's so common that lots of people do it, then it should be protected because that's just a common pool of stock, like, stock characters, right? Like it's our version of stock characters that,
right.
And that's kind of what we're working on now, is trying to understand how to express that to people.
Yeah. I'd have to go back and look at the range of quilts that I've had if I think there's any that are totally copyrightable, that are totally, I've never seen anything like this before, kind of thing.
Interesting.
What do you do with a sampler quilt when it's got a particular combination of blocks, but they're all fairly common blocks and patterns that may have been taken out of a book or something, with especially the newer ones,
So
how do you keep track of that, and different ways of sashing.
Right. And those are techniques, I would imagine, right? But I mean, the selection of the sashing and the blocks and the colors and the fabric all make a copyrightable thing. It's just the question of how copyrightable. Like it's thin, like, it's just your version of a wedding ring quilt. Right.
Yeah. And I mean, there's so many variables.
Yeah.
How wide is the sashing? Do you have borders?
Right.
Is the binding the same color as the border or different,
Right. It's funny, we don't have that many cases on quilts, but one was this alphabet quilt where it was like A, B, C, D, and it went down and then it had little creatures in different places. And the company had copied exactly like the same colors, the same placement, and the court found infringement. But then they had made a second one where they had changed the colors and they had changed the animals and they changed sort of how the alphabet, where they put them, and they didn't find infringement. So it didn't take very much for the courts to not think it was the same, which I thought was really interesting.
Right.
In terms of, you can't lock up wedding ring blue. The courts aren't going to be, but if you do exactly that same pattern, the court might feel like you've got a little bit. But they also didn't give him very many. The damages sucked. So they were like, yeah, sure, but like we're not making you pay. Like they didn't encourage people to sue. Yeah, and that I found really interesting too. That so I don't know. I mean, so that's the first part, originality. The second part of the question becomes, so the law distinguishes between published and unpublished, and published works get a certain term, unpublished get a different term. And it seems like these family quilts would be unpublished because they wouldn't have been out circulating. They weren't offered for sale. Right. And that's a totally different term, which is...
I'm publishing them on my blog.
You're publishing on the blog with the permission of the family. So that's interesting. But, how these are often... I imagine the people are dying... Like, we care about their death date. So are they dying... How old are the quilts, the people that are making the quilts? Are these usually 20th century quilts or they go back?
I probably get more 20th century, but I get 19th century too.
Yeah. So usually it's for unpublished, it's life of the author plus 70 years. And then there's this little window of time if it was, anyway, so it can be longer. It can be up to 2047. It's like 2047 or life plus 70, depending on whatever's longer. So you could see that strangely, all these family quilts may still be under copyright, but the published ones that are out and running, the patterns and all of that, and the other may be out of copyright. So the version they made, technically are still under copyright, but the underlying pattern isn't.
Right.
How weird is that?
Weird, yeah. Well, like this, the improved 9-patch I just did was made probably late 30s, maybe a little bit into the 40s, somewhere in the range, made by the current owners, who's my age group, current owner's great-grandmother.
Interesting.
So she didn't live too terribly long past when that quilt was made.
Right.
So if you're looking at her death date...
Yeah, but it's before, so the cutoff is before 1978. So if it's unpublished before, now I'm just getting technical because my other job is about duration, copyright duration, and it's a crazy, crazy way. But let's take that example of it. So if it's created before 1978 and it's unpublished as of 1978, then it's protected till 2047. Protected through 2047, even though she dies, because we have this little window of transition in the law. So that quilt that you're working on was probably still protected in its weird selection, arrangement, coordination of stuff for a long time.
Wow.
And again, the pattern itself isn't.
No.
But the selection and arrangement coordination of that weirdness, that teeny tiny bit of intellectual property that's in that quilt. Yeah, it's weird.
Yeah, it is. It is.
So like most of the stuff even though they're not enforcing the copyright or they don't care about it and it may be just a teeny tiny copyright, still I imagine a lot of the stuff that you're working on fits within that time period, you know.
Interesting.
Now, granted, if it could be coming out of copyright, but let me go back. It would have had to have been published during a certain period of time to get that full amount of time. And that probably didn't happen. So it's probably did come out of copyright in 2000 in 2002. But you can kind of see how weird it is, right? Like why would we care about all these unpublished works? And it's specifically a law about unpublished works that was just sort of take them. They used to be under state law, and then we put them into federal law. And that's what I did my tenure research on. My pre-tenure research was on this law of unpublished works. So again, that quilt probably isn't protected because it wasn't published during the 2000, the little period of time it had to get the extra time, but potentially it could be, you know, so.
Right.
Anyway, it's very odd. Oh my gosh, we're already close to time. That's craziness. So, but nobody in the families don't care. And you respect the families by asking them if you can tell their story on the blog. And they're not worried about copyright. That's not what they're concerned about. They're concerned more about family privacy and sharing their story. Would you say that's really where it is? It's not about copyright. It's about privacy.
Yeah. I don't think they would. I mean, if I said, have you ever thought that this might be a copyrighted design? They would kind of go, what?
Right, exactly. And like, what does that mean? And then you think it's economic and like, whatever. I mean, it's kind of, you know,
Yeah. I mean, if somebody saw that quilt and made and sold a pattern for exactly that block size and that layout and that border treatment and whatever, then wanted to make money off of it, then they might get concerned, I guess.
Maybe, but probably not even then, right? Like, I mean, that's the part that's so interesting. Now, it may be if a big fabric company or something, like there was a lot of money involved in it, they were sort of marketing. The one I find really interesting is Quilt Folk magazine has these. Have you seen their patterns where they take an old one and they pattern the old one and then they make a new one, inspiration one? I find that really fascinating too. Now, most of the time, again, the old quilts nobody cares, but that sort of the copyright stuff comes because they're now commercializing some old quilt that may or may not be under copyright, and then they are making money off of it. So that could be, but I think the families don't really care in that case either, right? They're just happy, excited that they're having a pattern made of their stuff. So I think it's all fine. I think most of the time copyright doesn't matter in these instances, but it is the technical side of it is that they still may be the ones you work on may or may not be under copyright, whereas the underlying pattern is in the public domain, which I think is so bizarre and interesting.
Yeah. So. Which I guess if it was mine and I didn't want somebody selling a duplicate, you know, it might concern me.
Yeah, right. So interesting. Well, I can't believe how fast the hour went, right?
Well,
craziness.
Well, when you wrote and said, did I want to do this? It was because I commented on the social justice place. And you said,
we didn't even get to that.
You want to talk about that? And I said, okay. So this was like, I'm kind of bowled over by this whole.
That's so funny. Okay, well, can you sign up again so we can talk about the social justice stuff? Because we didn't get to what we were supposed to.
I had that all prepped in my head.
Yeah, well, I mean, tell me a little bit about how you're feeling about the social justice stuff.
I think they're absolutely great.
I know, I do too.
That's a little bit.
Yeah, but, I mean, I think it's remarkable, right?
Yes, and it for me it ties in with the anthropology stuff too, that it's reaching, there's a cross-cultural thing going on in communication and understanding and all that sort of stuff, which is really wonderful, which is why I'm so excited to do it. And the other thing I had prepped in my head is that
sorry. Totally sorry.
is that I've been sitting here. I love what I'm doing with the quilts, but it doesn't really help people in the world who are really suffering and need support and whatever. And this is an outreach kind of thing, and it's helping bring, quilt art and recognition and a voice to people, all those things in her mission statement,
Yeah, it's remarkable.
And so being part of it is really cool, because I've been looking for something to.
And so what have you been doing with them?
I've just embroidered 2 blocks. And
how was that experience?
Oh, it was great. It was great. They were both really different and really neat. And I sent a box of fabric off to them, because I belong to the Needlework Guild that handles, all sorts of techniques and all that. But anyway, people keep donating fabric if either they're clearing out their own stuff, or some friends say, I've got all this sewing supplies and stuff. Do you know who wants it? So there's always this table of giveaways, huge sometimes, at every meeting. And the women who haul that stuff back and forth have now, know what I'm doing, and they're setting aside quilt weight cottons.
That's so great.
For sending out to the social justice people.
To Sarah, that's amazing.
Make more quilts, yeah.
That's really great. Well, their stuff is just stunning and amazing, and really, really remarkable. I can't wait to see what happens to the kids. So some of them are like creating these full art pieces that are now in museums and stuff. And like, is she encouraging and I mean, I think the whole project's awesome, but I'm really curious to see like what she's like spurs on with a generation of, does she help create a new generation of artists that will, I'd be really interesting to see what happens to her.
Hopefully so, right?
Yeah.
She's amazing.
She is amazing. We have to figure out other ways to sort of help support that project, because I think I'm so glad you're sending and also embroidering. But yeah, sort of supporting that project is really important, because she's doing such great work, and she's so amazing. She's amazing.
I know.
Yeah.
Yeah. I was sitting sewing, listening to it, and I kind of actually stopped sewing and just listened, My goodness, this person is incredible.
Yeah, she's incredible. She's incredible.
Yeah.
Her booth was next to ours in Houston, so we got to spend some time with her.
Oh, sweet.
Really, really even more amazing in person, like the whole organization and who they are, and just like, they're like I don't know, they're just amazing. Like sort of what they're doing and who they are and how they're approaching it is just like all the right things. And like this amazing way. Well, I'm so psyched that you're working with them and that we didn't get to that. See, the hour goes by really fast in this really crazy way. And then we get off onto tangents, and that was on my list and I just didn't get to it. So, will you come back and chat more? I would love it if,
Sure.
Okay, cool.
Really? Okay.
Yeah, of course. What do you mean? Yeah. Come back and chat more. It'd be great. Yeah. Okay. It'd be great.
I'll show you my button collection.
Totally. I would love to learn about buttons. Let's do that.
I can't
That's
teach
so
you
great.
I'd love to learn about buttons. If you find a button person to interview, please do it.
Well, we might be in Chicago also this summer. My kid might be there for a school thing, and so we will be running about while she's there. So I'd love to spend time and see your button collection.
Run on over to Evanston, yes.
Totally, exactly.
I can fangirl to you in person.
That's cool. That would be really great. And I want to see your studio and all your buttons and just be immersed in all of it. It would be so great.
Yeah. At this point, you kind of have to see the studio from outside. There's not room for 2 people in it.
That's the way a studio should be. Then you're doing something right then. Well, I adore talking to you. Thanks so much. I really appreciate it. Do you need to review it before we post?
Thank you. I don't think so. No.
I don't think you didn't say anything controversial or naughty or.
No,
you can't put explicit on it, so that's when our ratings go up when we have explicit.
I could if you want me to. I was being careful.
I know, it's so funny.
I did archaeology for several seasons. That's actually where I didn't do archaeology is within the anthropology department, but I did archaeology for several
Oh, you
summers,
did?
and my mouth got really dirty.
Because you had to fit in. It was part of the culture.
If I let it out, well, it's part of my life now, but I try not to let it out. And
that's very funny. Well, next time I'll be very explicit, so our ratings go up. Because somehow people like naughty quilters.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah, our numbers are higher when people swear. It's weird.
Okay.
What's that about? That's that weird? Yeah, because I have to put the little explicit rating on it. People are curious.
Yeah, that's not. Keep talking about people saying, "Oh, that's not your grandmother's quilt." That's not the way your grandmother talked.
No, well, but you don't know. You never know. They might have,
Yeah, mine didn't. Oh my goodness.
Mine didn't either. All right, you're adorable and wonderful and funny, and I really let's chat some more.
Okay.
Cool. So funny.
Much. Thank you so much.
Hiya.
Bye.
Take care.
Thank you.
So you've been listening to Just Wanna Quilt, a research podcast coming out of Tulane University Law School. And I'm Elizabeth Townsend Garr. If you like this podcast, keep listening. Also, we have a Facebook group. Come join us. We talk about a lot of things. We also have an Instagram account. And of course, most importantly, I really hope you get a chance to quilt today.